So everything from heart disease to strokes to cancer, autoimmune disease across the board, everything is related to these infections. And people don't know they're there. And there's literally 30 million root canals performed in the United States per year. So the number of root canals walking around in people's heads,
that's
astronomical.
It's been years of getting amalgam fillings removed, taking care of abscesses. So it's saved my life. I mean, it was turned off my brain fog. It was a big thing that I did about starting 20 years ago.
And it's so interesting because people will say, yeah, I've struggled. I was diagnosed with, low thyroid when I was like 20. I'll say, oh, really? When did you get your wisdom teeth out? When I was 19. Okay. I haven't been sleeping pretty much my whole adult life. When did you get your wisdom teeth out? Oh, when I was like 21. How long have you not been sleeping? Since I was about 21.
Yeah. Wow.
Interesting. And nobody connects these two pieces together.
All right. Good morning and welcome everybody to the Unreasonable Health Podcast. This is your host of the day, Kate Archibald, and really excited to be here. We got a really, really cool special guest on with us, as well as we have Reagan Archibald as usual, and really excited to dive into some really cool stuff. Before we jump in there, just want to make sure if you're not a part of our Health Accelerator Challenge community, please check that out. Go to acueastwest.com/hack. That's HAC. And there we go through different health challenges and everything. The challenge this week, and I'm going to post this in the notes as well as in the chat box for everyone joining us live on the webinar platform, is get your best future worksheet filled out. So that's in your chat box here for those attending with us live, but fill that out. Really cool experience. So the last podcast, you guys heard us going through that, and that's the challenge this week. So figure out how you can create your next decade, your best decade. And so with us, and then along with that, we wanted to announce the peptide of the week. And so, Reagan, I'm going to let you talk about the peptide of the week.
All right. Peptide of the week is Bio-Regulator. And bio-regulators are unique peptides because they're smaller amino acid chains. But one of my favorite peptide bio-regulators is called POLO. And this is for you dudes out there who want to maximize your body's hormones without stressing out your prostate and creating any other issues. So this peptide bioregulator is called POLO. And POLO includes 3 different bioregulators. It includes testosterone, glandocort, and libidon. And it's called POLO Plus. And what some of the research shows is that it helps improve the hormone function. So it helps on the endocrine system. It improves your own natural testosterone production. It can increase your ability to handle stress more effectively, because stress probably won't go away. But it also can help with libido, great for fertility and increasing sperm count. And it also helps improve the prostate function. So POLO is the peptide of the day.
Awesome. Thank you, Reagan. So I'll put a link in there if anyone wants to learn a little bit more about that, or at least see it. You'll see that in the show notes. Awesome. Well, I want to introduce our special guest today, Dr. Michelle Jorgensen. She's an internationally acclaimed author, speaker, teacher, biologic, holistic dentist, and health and wellness provider. She's author of 4 books. Very impressive, Michelle. Healthy Mouth, Healthy You, Holistic Dental Care, as well as Be Prepared, Not Scared, 12 Steps to Emergency Preparedness. And then the third one is Self-Sufficient Living, a 12-step guide to help you gain security to learning to provide for yourself. And the fourth book is 100 Days from the Garden, 100 days of seasonal recipes and eating from the Living Well Gardens with bonus harvest preservation and health tips. So awesome. You got a really impressive resume here, as well as a couple different sites that I'll add into the show notes as well. But welcome to the show, Michelle.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to pass the baton over to Reagan. He's going to handle the interview, and I'll be here handling any questions anyone has in the chat box. I'll let you know if anything comes up.
Great. Thanks, Kate. Michelle, it's so good to connect again. And you and I connected on a kind of a patient relationship years ago.
Yep.
And your journey, your transformation's just been so impressive. But give us kind of a snapshot of what's happened in your life the last decade.
Yeah, quite a bit, actually. So it's interesting. I just realized this morning that part of my story has to do, you were part of the story. So I thought, well, this is going to be kind of a fun thing to share. I am a general dentist, and I grew up in a dental family. My father's a dentist. I have 3 younger brothers that are dentists. I mean, this is just what we do. And so we were having a busy practice. Everything was going well. And then I started getting really sick. And my dad is still practicing in his 70s. He hasn't had a sick day in his life. This just wasn't something that I expected. And I certainly didn't expect that it was related to my profession at all. So started doing all the normal routes, all the traditional medicine ways of going with, blood tests and x-rays and doctor visits, and nobody could tell me anything. And one of my big symptoms was numbness. I had a lot of numbness. And so that's how I ended up in your office, because I had a lot of numbness in my hands, in my arm, shoulder. And I got to the point that I literally couldn't even use instruments anymore. And as a dentist, that doesn't work very well. You have to be able to use your hands. So I was doing everything, doing acupuncture, chiropractic work, anything, massage. I was getting massages 2 and 3 times a week. And it was barely keeping me working, barely. And my gut was a mess, and my memory was just like shot. I've always had a really good memory, and I couldn't remember anything. So I actually had my practice for sale, and I didn't know what I was going to do. Here I was, mid-30s, late 30s, and young family. This is our family business. So it was the end of everything if I was going to be, leaving practice. And finally, I was reaching out to find out, could I speak or consult or do something still in the industry? And another practitioner said, have you looked into mercury poisoning at all? And I said, well, I don't have any mercury fillings. I don't know what you're talking about. And they said, oh, no, it's not the fillings you have. It's the ones you've been drilling out for the last 10 years without any protection. Now, I have been in dentistry forever. Remember, my whole family's in dentistry. Not a word about this. I had no idea that this could be a thing. No idea that this could be harmful to the dentist, to the patient. So I learned, and I had learned in school, that the silver fillings, quote unquote, silver fillings, are actually 50% mercury. But we'd been taught that was stable. It wasn't a concern for patients, for anybody. Well, I'd never thought that when I'm drilling it out, because I was a cosmetic dentist. People don't like the way they look. They wanted all those fillings out of there. So I'm drilling them out. Didn't realize that my face is, 4 inches above their face. And all of that mercury vapor that I'm releasing is coming right up into my head. So all of a sudden, all the symptoms made sense. I went and got tested, mercury toxicity off the charts. So my symptoms made sense because mercury is a neurotoxin. So it affects the brain, it affects all the nerves in the hands, it affects the gut, it affects all of those things. Yeah. So I had to figure out, I know work with people who have heavy metal toxicity all the time. Oh, yeah. I didn't know what to do. I didn't have a clue what to do. So the doctors basically said, you can't get it out if you're going to keep putting it in. So you have to figure out, can you keep being a dentist and get well at the same time? So I had to find out there were places actually that have protocol for safe mercury removal. I didn't even know they existed. So I started learning their protocols, and I was doing it just for me. This was just for my own health. And all of a sudden the patients were kind of perking up going, oh, what are you doing here? This is pretty interesting. This is very different. And So I'd start to explain it and they'd say, oh, my doctor is looking for somebody who does that. Are you interested in talking with them? So I started talking to doctors, and then doctors started asking me questions. Oh, do you know about ozone? Oh, do you know about problems with root canals and cavitations? And I didn't have a clue what they were talking about. Like, I didn't know what any of these things were. So I'd have to go to some obscure class somewhere. I mean, I took an ozone class, like a veterinary ozone class, to learn how to do ozone, because there weren't resources.
Not a lot of resources. Yeah.
Yeah. So I had to go all over to try to learn all these things. So I would learn it for the doctor. They were the ones telling me what I should be learning. I would go learn it. I would bring it back to practice. And all of a sudden I went, whoa, what else in dentistry have I not been taught about? Does dentistry itself not know about, the profession and the professionals in dentistry that could really be harmful to our patients' health? And it has completely transformed the way I've thought. So I went back to school, became a traditional naturopath, brought in a whole bunch of health-related pieces into dentistry, and my practice is completely different. So now basically all we see we see a lot of people, but we see a lot of people who are not well, who really have been to 15 different doctors and they have not received answers, and they come in our office and all of a sudden we find root cause for things they've been struggling with for decades. So that's what we do now. And it's certainly been an interesting journey that I did not expect to be on.
Yeah, it wasn't what you signed up for. And what's interesting is your body just had a threshold that was lower than like your father's, your grandfather, because they were doing the same things for years. But that's the same thing that happened to me. And with exposure to glyphosate on the farm, is my friends didn't have the autoimmune triggers. That was me. And then when I ran my genetics, we found I had MTHFR,
yep,
RR and COMT variants. And so all those morphisms make a difference. Yep. So in what you're doing now, Michelle, I mean, this is transformative. So I've got a couple friends in the Valley. You may know David Peterson. He's a good friend, client of ours here. Eugene Pei out of Bountiful. Dr. Wall. I mean, there's just a few of you hovering around, but the difference in you is you've really honed in on understanding nutrition and understanding the entire biology. And so what was it that made the shift in you to say, I'm not going to study naturopathic medicine and go even deeper in this?
I've always been the kind that loves to learn. I'm like, the room behind me is full of books. Over there is full. Like, I love to learn. And I don't like it when I don't have an answer. So patients would ask me questions like, well, gosh, I have terrible gut function. What do you know about that? And I didn't know the answer. Well, I don't like that. So I thought, well, let's go find the answers. And what I found is that it really creates a better environment as a practitioner. I'm able to help people completely. I was able to help with teeth, but now we're able to connect the dots and put everything together. And sometimes people just sit and cry in the chair sometimes. In fact, most of the time, and we hand them Kleenexes and say, you're not the first. And they just say, why don't people know this?
Yeah.
Why has no one talked to me about this before? Why have they never connected the dots? A woman just yesterday, she said, I've been working with a practitioner for a long time. She cannot sleep at all. Like, she cannot sleep and she's just miserable. And she said, they are so excited and they're saying we're done because I'm sleeping 5 hours a night now. She's like, is that as good as it gets? She said, obviously that's better than like 3, but 5 still, I don't feel good. And we talked through it, and we talked through gut and digestion and sleep issues and what she can do. And she's like, why do people not know this? So for me, it was those unanswered questions. I'm just not okay with them being unanswered.
Yeah, and you're a naturally curious human, and that curiosity is what leads to innovation and helps transform people's lives. What are the biggest threats that you see that are going on in people's mouths right now?
So we call them the big 3. The first one is metals, heavy metals. And that one's honestly the most known, even though people are still usually surprised when I say those silver fillings have 50% mercury in them. They're like, what? Still? Yeah. Still. And they're still being put in people's mouths today in the United States. In a lot of European countries, they've been banned, but here they are not, and they will never be, just because of the way our legal system works. If they were ever said to be, harmful or any of those words that we're not supposed to use, then every dentist who's ever placed one would be under a class action lawsuit. That's just the way our world works, our litigious society works. So it will never be said that it will never be banned here. They just can't. They can't. The organizations protect the professionals, and they can't. So we have to share this information. But yes, those fillings are 50% mercury, and that's being released day and night. Doesn't matter what you're doing, but particularly if you're brushing or chewing or talking or, any
chewing gum. Yes.
anything that's touching the teeth together, that's going to stimulate the mercury release. But I always tell people it's actually better to leave them in than to remove them unsafely. Because if you remove them unsafely, you've just released the demon, and so you have to remove them very, very safely. So that's the first one, is mercury. Yep. The second one is infection. And this is one that, yes, please jump in wherever.
On the mercury, I've had a lot of dentists in the past. They've said, you eat a can of tuna and you'll get more mercury exposure from that can of tuna than you're going to get from the mercury fillings. Can you just elaborate a little more on just the level of toxicity that people are getting from a single filling? And then what happens when somebody's got like several molars that have amalgam fillings in them, for example?
Well, the problem is the comparison between a can of tuna and a mouthful of mercury fillings. First of all, it's completely not the same thing. They're actually different kinds of mercury entirely. There's called organic mercury and there's called methyl mercury, and they're different in the tuna and in the mercury fillings. But the tuna you eat once, it clears. The mercury fillings in your mouth are there 24/7. They never leave you. So there are studies, and this is something, in years past, if a dentist talked about mercury fillings, they would lose their license. And there was a huge leader named Hal Huggins that did. He lost his license. He ended up having to run a clinic, but not practice in it, using his protocols. But he wasn't the one able to practice because he lost his license, because he was telling people this could be damaging. We have to be a little careful about what we say, but I can tell you things that are proven by research. And what research has shown is that these fillings do release mercury 24/7. So there is a low dose mercury release from them nonstop. So it's all quantitative, meaning if you have one filling, you're going to have less than if you have 8 fillings, right? Because it's just the amount. So all of those fillings are going to release mercury, particularly during times of chewing, brushing, so any kind of agitation at all, and heat changes, temperature changes. So if you have something hot, then you have something cold. So they are going to release mercury. The other problem is the hot and cold. Mercury is a metal. The whole filling is a metal. It's called an amalgam or an alloy. So it's a combination of different metals combined. Well, when metal gets hot, it expands. Well, it's in a closed system. It's inside a tooth. So when that metal gets hot, it expands. It actually cracks the tooth. When any metal gets cold, it contracts. So every time you eat something hot, then drink something cold, you're doing this inside of a tooth. So what we see with mercury fillings are cracks all down the tooth everywhere. And there's no glue between the filling and the tooth. That's not the way a mercury filling works. They are actually held in mechanically. So when you place a mercury filling, I was trained in school, you create what's called undercuts in the tooth, where you actually wedge them underneath the edges of the tooth, and that's how the filling stays in. So as they're getting hot, cold, what happens is it creates this gap between the filling and the tooth. So now bacteria in the mouth, which are little tiny, they get between the filling and the tooth, and nearly every mercury filling I've ever removed has new decay underneath it. You can't clean underneath the filling. So I tell people all the time, I don't even care if you're concerned about your health with these fillings. These things damage and break teeth every single day. So if you just from a tooth standpoint and longevity standpoint, just get them replaced, but do it very, very safely, because that mercury, when they're released, as I know only too well, that's the highest dose of mercury you're going to get is during that removal process. So we have a whole bunch. We have like 10 different things that we do. We use rubber dams. We use special big vacuums at your chin. We cover your face. We cover your body. Like we cover everything. We wear, mercury respirators when we're doing this. Make sure you're going to someone who's doing that if you're going to have it removed, as well as metal detoxing. And you work with that, making sure the body's systems are ready to dump that junk. Making sure that there's something in the body to grab it when it's released and get rid of it. That's all really important during that process too.
Man, that is so helpful because it's death by 1,000 cuts when you have just that little neurotoxin leaking out every day. It's like, why am I tired in the afternoon? Why am I getting brain fog? My hands feel stiff. I mean, it's just these little tiny symptoms that can really turn into big problems. So, all right, let's go to number 2. Thank you for elaborating on that, by the way.
Yes.
It was awesome.
Number 2 is infection. And this one, I believe, is even bigger than mercury because of the incidence of it. So the 2 infections that we see that are huge and hidden, that's the problem, is these are hidden. They're often are not symptomatic. You don't even know they're going on. Are number 1, failed root canals. And number 2, areas where you had teeth removed that didn't heal properly. Neither of them has local symptoms. So you'll say, well, I had a root canal, but it doesn't hurt. There's nothing wrong. You'll show up in my office. I take a cone beam CT scan and I found that you have a hole the size of a quarter in your jawbone that new infection has eaten away, and you actually have 0 symptoms for it. So this is the huge smoking gun. You and I talked briefly before we started here about the relationship between heart disease. Honestly, it's between anything that creates or that's an inflammatory condition, which is any chronic disease. So everything from heart disease to strokes to cancer, autoimmune disease across the board, everything is related to these infections. And people don't know they're there. And there's literally 30 million root canals performed in the United States per year. So the number of root canals walking around in people's heads,
that's
astronomical.
It's almost 10% of the population. 30 million?
Yep, per year.
Holy cow. Wow.
Yep. Nearly everyone has at least one.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so when the root canals happen, you can get these abscesses that can go, it's hard to find them in an x-ray because the x-ray is giving you a snapshot. A CAT scan, like you're doing, is more advanced because it's going slices. And so you can actually see those pockets almost 3-dimensionally. What are some, so should anybody who's had a root canal get a CAT scan to see if there's abscesses, or how do you, what's the best way of handling that?
Yep. So let me talk to you about why the problem exists to begin with.
Yeah.
So what a root canal is if a tooth is decayed to the nerve or cracked to the nerve, there's been trauma to the tooth, something has happened that's affected the nerve inside of the tooth. The nerve channel on the inside of the tooth is in the center. There's a main nerve channel kind of on the top of the tooth, and then there's one that goes all the way down the root, and that's where the blood vessels and the nerves and everything enter from the body into the tooth. It brings the nutrition in, everything comes in through that tooth. So there's the main nerve channel. And then inside of the tooth, there's little tiny tubes that go off of that main nerve channel. And it makes sense because the nutrients need to get from the body to all the way to the tip of your tooth out here, so there needs to be little tiny channels to let those nutrients flow. And there literally is like a fluid flow. There's a fluid flow inside of the tooth. So when the root canal is done, they clean out that main nerve channel up on the top and that main nerve canal. So that's why it's called a root canal. So they clean the blood vessel and the nerve tissue out of the main root canal. But those little tubes are too small. They're too small, and there's literally a mile of them in every single tooth. They're too small to clean. There's no way to clean or fill them. So the root canal filling material is placed in the tooth. It seals off that root canal and in essence seals in everything that's in those tubes. So now you have kind of a sewer backing up inside of the tooth. The fluid can't flow back out again because it's been sealed when that root canal is done. And there's dead tissue in there now. There's existing bacteria that's already been in the tooth, especially if it was infected before the root canal was done. It's full of bugs. And there's no way the immune system can get to that because the nerve and blood vessel was removed. So your immune system can't get there. So now those bacteria, they're having a heyday. So they are the bad dudes. They're the anaerobic guys, the guys that live without oxygen. And they live in there. And I talk about how they have parties. They have frat parties hanging out in your tooth, and they're dumping their beer cans out. And basically all of their
music.
They're having music. I mean, they're having a party because there's no policeman that can get to that party. There's no good guys that can get there right now. So all of their toxins that they're dumping just necrose the bone, just kill the bone. all around it.
Oh.
And that's what we're looking for. Once that bone dies, now all of those endotoxins can get into the bloodstream. And every time you chew on that tooth, you're spreading those throughout the entire body. So this is why you will find on your blood tests and things, low level, you'll see inflammation markers rising. You'll see white blood cells off. You'll see things off, not drastically, just a little. And you're like, where is the infection? Like, where is this? We can't find it. We don't know where it's at. It's because it's low level, low dose, chronic, never ends frat party going on in here. And that infection is spreading everywhere and you can't feel it because the nerve is gone. The nerve is gone. So the sensation's gone. Bone actually doesn't have a lot of innervation. So the bone's dying, the bone's getting eaten away, but you don't actually feel bone the same way as you feel teeth. So you don't know it. So this is a deadly thing that literally has killed people. There's a study that's shown that 70% of heart attacks, the clot that actually killed the person had mouth-specific bacteria in it, meaning 70% of those heart attacks that were fatal came from the mouth.
70%. I knew it was high, but that is ridiculously high. And I would say, Michelle, in the labs that we run, if you look at the neutrophils being elevated, it's probably about 50% of the people we run that on. And then you start seeing the ferritin creep up, the C-reactive protein creep up. And a lot of patients I ask, almost every single one of those, I say, do you have any root canals? They're like, oh yeah, but it's been a long time. It doesn't bother me. I'm like, well, this is so good. Now I can just share them this podcast and I'll say, okay, here's why it's dangerous and actually life-threatening from what you're telling us.
Yep. So you have to get the cone beam CT scan. You know, there's one that I often share when I do webinars and things. There's an X-ray. I'll always remember this woman. I literally remember her face in my mind still. She came in and she said, and I think I even did the root canal. Okay. I've done thousands of root canals. I have not done one in 10 years, but before that time, I didn't know any different either. This is just what we're taught in dentistry, that we're supposed to save teeth no matter what. We're supposed to save the tooth. Now I say, you know what? I'm going to save your health, even if it means you're going to lose a tooth, because I can replace your tooth. I can replace your tooth all day long, but I can't replace your health. So I remember this woman, she complained about a tooth. She said, this tooth just bothers me. It's had a root canal, but it just bothers me. So we took a traditional dental x-ray, the kind that you put in the mouth and you take it's a little square. And I said, it looks fine. I've looked at how many, thousands of root canals. It looks just fine. She's like, it doesn't feel right. I had just gotten my first cone beam CT scan machine in the office. And so I said, you know what? Let's do a picture. Let's just go do a CT scan. Let's see what this looks like. Pulled up the CT scan and I just gasped. There was literally the size of a quarter or maybe bigger bone just gone, completely eaten away, hole in her jawbone above 2 teeth, but it was coming from the one root canal tooth. I could not see it at all on that traditional dental x-ray. So if dentists are missing this, people ask me this every day. They're like, why has no other dentist found this? I said, has any dentist ever taken a cone beam CT scan? Well, no, that's why they haven't found it. You can't see it. You literally can't see it. So a cone beam CT scan is dental specific. I tell people all the time, it's not the same as the hospital, not the same thing. Radiation is much lower. We're just looking at this right here. It's in 3D. I can turn your head around. I can turn you upside down. I can do all of this and
see really cool
everything about what's going on with those teeth. And I find yesterday I had my big new patient day. I saw 18 new patients yesterday. And on those 18 new patients, I would bet I probably found at least 50 failed root canals amongst those people just yesterday alone. So I just sit down with you knee to knee and show you. I'm like, okay, let me show you what we're looking for. And then you and I look together and see if we find any of them. And we'll scroll through and they'll go, whoa, that one right there. I'm like, yep, that one right there. That one's infected. All right, let's go look at the other one. Oh, look at that one. Oh, that one's huge. Yep, that one's huge. So it's easy to see once you have the right diagnostic tool.
Yeah, and we have a philosophy, no death by neglect. And so for those of you who have not done this on your mouth, if you had any root canals, Even if someone hasn't had a root canal, do you still find abscesses that are asymptomatic?
We do. And it's surprising. And we find them. In fact, I found one yesterday on a woman, and she said, well, I had no idea. She had a huge filling. And so a filling had been done. It was really close to the nerve. The tooth had died. Sometimes people say, oh, it was really sensitive after my filling for a little while, but then it went away. Well, that could be good. That could actually be bad. It could mean that the tooth just died. And that's why the sensitivity stopped. So that's what happened on hers. The tooth died. Sensitivity went away. Great. Everything's good. No, now this infection's spreading up into the jawbone.
Man. And so, having the root canal, the solutions, I mean, what do you do?
Yeah. And these are the parts that nobody likes to hear. Yeah. So unfortunately, again, thinking about that root with all those tubes in it, the problem is those parties happening in the tubes and all the bacteria in the root. You can have a root canal redone, but when they redo a root canal, all they're doing is cleaning out the filling material in the center root canal and putting it back in again. So it might freshen it up. It might get a year or two more out of it, but during that year or two, how is it impacting your health? I always ask that, what is it doing in that year or two until it blows up again? So the only way we have to fix this right now is we have to remove the tooth, because that root with all of those bacteria in it has to come out. And sometimes people are confused. They're like, wait a minute, I had a root canal. Isn't the root already gone? No, the inside of the root has been cleaned out and filled, but the root is still there. To be able to get rid of the problem, we have to remove the whole root. So we remove the tooth, and then typically we like to replace that with a ceramic dental implant. So we replace it with a dental implant that replaces the tooth. I have an implant right here. I tell people all the time, you can't tell. It smiles like a tooth. It chews like a tooth. It's perfect. It's been there for 30 years with no problems at all. And it just replaces the tooth like you never lost one. But this one is healthy and your body likes it.
And what kind of post do you use on those? What's ideal? Because I know some people, putting a post in is a concern with heavy metals and disrupting the meridian systems in that area.
Yep. So the typical or traditional one has been titanium. That's been the one that's been around for 40 years in dentistry. Thankfully, we now have ceramic versions. So there's zirconia is what it's called, and they're non-conductive. That's the key for the meridians, is they don't conduct. So they're not going to throw off any of the electrical potential or electrical flow happening along that meridian line. And obviously acupuncture, that's your world. So you know all about meridians, but that's the key, is the non-conductive properties of the ceramic. So top to bottom, there's no metal at all involved. And that's important. One thing that's really interesting actually about titanium, because it's not just dental implants that we're concerned about. Think about all the metal shoulders and knees and hips that are done in our world today. And so there's been a lot of research in the orthopedics world. Actually, most of the research is coming out of orthopedics, not even dentistry. What they're finding is that the titanium, because it's conductive in our world where we're surrounded with frequencies now, Wi-Fi, cellular frequencies, a frequency is just a movement that creates movement in metal. I tell people it's like a microwave. A microwave is just waves that pass through the metal and make those metal particles go faster and heat up. Same thing happens when we're in Wi-Fi frequencies or cellular frequencies. So they're finding that when those frequencies pass through a metal titanium implant, it heats it up about 4 to 5 degrees. Metal hips, metal knees, the same thing. That 4 to 5 degrees is enough to literally melt bone around them. So we're seeing a really huge increase of implant loss, metal implant loss, and they're blaming it on all sorts of things. But I actually think it's heat and conductivity that's causing it. So that's why I've steered completely away from titanium, because I want these implants to be a lifelong restoration for people when we place them. So we do ceramic, the body loves them, no conductivity, no heat. The gums just grow right to them.
Man, I love that. And we see that all the time in failed joint replacements. And this is where I tell people, I said, hey, with regenerative medicine, we can do so much, but it's getting better. If you just hold on to your same joints for another 10 years, we'll be able to regrow the entire thing. So
hopefully we can regrow teeth someday. If you can figure that out for me, I'd be so happy.
There's actually, you've seen the studies on stem cells. I mean,
we use stem cells all the time.
Yeah, it's happening in the laboratory. I think the FDA really adopting it. That's a whole nother world that you and I don't have much control over.
No.
So those are the first two things, huge. And I agree on the bacteria one. If you look at the heavy metal, it feels like there's something actionable you can take very quickly. The infection one, that's what literally heart disease is the number one killer in the United States. Over 600,000 people die every year from it, and if 70% of those heart disease, you're finding the clot that causes it has bacterial species from the mouth, that originates from the mouth. That's something that we all need to look into. So let's jump into number 3.
Let me finish number 2 real quick, because we didn't talk about where you had teeth removed. So people they'll often say, well, I don't have any teeth. I didn't have any teeth removed. Did you have wisdom teeth removed? 80, 90% of people, yes, I had wisdom teeth removed. And we don't think about it again, right? We were like 16. Your teeth came out. You don't think about it ever again. Well, unfortunately, around every tooth, there's something called a ligament. It's called the PDL, periodontal ligament. And that ligament doesn't come out with the tooth, just like a tooth. It's like I tell people, it's like a placenta and a baby. You have to intentionally remove it separately from the tooth. Right. Well, often they're not removed with wisdom teeth, because wisdom teeth, we're taking them out when kids are 15. The wisdom tooth is up by your sinus or down by your nerves, and nobody wants to go poking around down there. So the ligament stays. And what happens is it doesn't alert the body that a tooth's been removed for about 10 days until that ligament dies and necroses. But there's no kick on that says, hey, it's time to start growing bone, because they think the tooth's still there, the ligament's still there, tooth's still there. In those 10 days, the gum tissue grows down into that hole, surrounds that dead ligament, and you end up with this dead area in the bone, a dead zone in the bone that bone doesn't grow in. Anything that's dead always attracts bugs. So we find bacteria, viruses, fungus, parasites. You cannot believe what we biopsy out of these holes. And it's so interesting, because people will say, yeah, I've struggled. I was diagnosed with, low thyroid when I was like 20. I'll say, oh, really? When did you get your wisdom teeth out? When I was 19. Okay. I haven't been sleeping pretty much my whole adult life. When did you get your wisdom teeth out? Oh, when I was like 21. How long have you not been sleeping? Since I was about 21.
Yeah. Wow.
Interesting. And nobody connects these two pieces together. Acne. Oh, I never had acne till I was like 20. Oh, really? When did you get your wisdom teeth out? When I was 19. Okay. Interesting. Lyme disease popped up then. Oh yeah. I've had, this autoimmune problem condition showed up about my early 20s. So these are low dose chronic infections, the same. And people will ask me, just yesterday, a lady said, well, why is all the antibiotics I've taken my whole life not taking care of it? Well, it's a dead zone. They can't get in. Remember, they're having frat parties in there. No police can get in. It's all dead. There's no blood flow in there, but they can get out. So they dump their toxins out, but the good guys can't get in to kill them. So it's just this nice, warm, dark, wet place that they love. And they are having parties. And the things and so meridians very well. The meridian that's connected with wisdom teeth is endocrine system. So if you ever talk to anybody who's ever, tired at all, fatigued, no hormones issues, especially sex hormones are related to this. So any infertility issues, thyroid problems, hearts and stomach. Those are the other things that are related to the meridians where the wisdom teeth are. So a lot of people have had those issues since they were in their early 20s, even late teens. We often will connect it. What do? We go back in and clean them out. So we have to go in and we scrub it out. We disinfect it with ozone, and then we fill it up with stem cells. That's where we use the stem cells. So we put stem cells, growth factors, everything right in those holes, which says grow bone. It's time. Grow bone, get the bugs out. Cannot believe resolution of adrenal issues, fatigue issues, chronic fatigue that people have had since late teens goes away once we get these infections out. So that's the second half of the second one. That's huge, because so many people have had wisdom teeth removed.
I'm so glad you brought that up. And so do you recommend people leave their wisdom teeth in?
If there's room. I always recommend leaving them if there's room. The trouble is, that's a whole nother talk. The trouble is that our nutrition has changed.
There's the nutrition, yes.
Nutrition has changed in today's world.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the maxilla, so the top jaw, is the first bone affected by malnutrition. Isn't that interesting? Yeah. So now our mouths are forming too small to fit all the teeth. So we don't have room. So what do? When we remove wisdom teeth, we do the same procedure. We get the ligament out, we ozone it, make sure there's nothing in there, and then we put stem cells in so it initiates bone growth so that the problems can't occur after we remove the wisdom teeth. So there are ways to prevent it. And it's all found on the cone beam CT scan. So that's the screening tool that you need to find.
Yeah. Yeah. When I had mine done, I've had it done several times. And I've had a lot of a deep history of massive dental work because my mom was a dental assistant for a while. And so we had free dentistry, and maybe we had dental insurance, but I swear the dentist just drilled on me when I was a kid because he didn't like me. And yeah, it's been years of getting amalgam fillings removed, taking care of abscesses. So it's saved my life. I mean, it was turned off my brain fog. It was a big thing that I did about starting 20 years ago. So, you're giving us some very interesting insights into, what to do if there's an infection, what to do if there's heavy metal. Weston A. Price, he did his whole book. He studied the Aboriginal people, and he noticed the difference in their mouth structure. And maybe if we have time, we can dive into that a little bit. But what was the third thing that people miss and the big threats in their mouth?
The third one is airway. A lot of people don't know about this or think that a dentist should be involved at all. But there are so many people in today's world that actually don't sleep well. They don't sleep well. And even if they feel like they sleep okay, they actually aren't getting into deep sleep, which I call construction zone. So you actually have to get into deep sleep to get that restorative process kick-started in the body. That's where everything starts to regenerate. That's when all the cells remake themselves. That's when all of that happens. And if you are never in deep sleep, you never get that. So many people say, well, I sleep, but I never feel rested. I always wake up tired. I never feel good in the morning. Well, it's because you're not getting into deep sleep. And often it's a physical problem. So the infections we talked about are a huge part of this. If there's infection, particularly in those wisdom tooth areas in the back of the mouth, it causes swelling. That swelling creates tissue blockage or obstruction in the airway. So as soon as you lay back, that tissue that's now swollen and thickened falls back into the airway and you can't breathe. So what people will do is the body automatically does a couple things. You squeeze your teeth. So people say, oh yeah, I clench and grind at night. Well, it's because you can't breathe. So because when you squeeze your teeth, it flattens the tongue and allows more air past. A lot of times people will get worn off teeth right here in the front. It's because you automatically move your bottom jaw forward. That makes more room in the airway. So people grow extra bumps of bone. There's extra bumps of bone that grow underneath the tongue next to out here. People have no clue that not everybody has those. Those are grown in response to pressure. The more squeezing you're doing, the more bone is growing. So those are signs that you really aren't getting enough air. And as soon as you engage a muscle, you're out of deep sleep, because the definition of deep sleep is paralysis. So as soon as you squeeze your teeth, you're out of deep sleep. As soon as you move your jaw forward, you're out of deep sleep. As soon as you roll over to try to open the airway, you're out of deep sleep. So the more movement that happens, the less deep sleep, restorative sleep you're actually getting. So we talk all day long to people about what do you do about this? Another part of the problem is that small jaw that we already talked about. Weston A. Price identified in the 1930s. These small jaws don't allow room for the tongue, for the tissues, for everything that belongs in the mouth. There's not enough room, so it has to fall back. And the worst thing is there's a whole generation of people that they took 4 teeth out on for braces because their teeth were crooked. So they said, the easiest way to keep them straight is let's take 4 teeth out, and then everything straightens up super fast because there's not as many teeth in the mouth. Well, guess what we've now done? We've now permanently made too small of a space for the tongue and the airway. And so we've created an ambient generation. Now we have an entire generation of people who had 4 teeth removed for braces that don't sleep. And it's because they simply can't. There's not enough room. So we always start with infection. Is there infection that's causing swelling? That's step number 1.
Yeah.
Get that out. Then we shrink up tissue. So we have lasers that actually shrink up the stuff that's all stretched out and swollen, shrink up the tissue. If that's not enough, we actually then expand the mouth and make more room for everything to fit. And you can do it even in adults. We do it in everybody. It doesn't matter your age. We make the mouth bigger again for you to be able to breathe. This is absolutely huge. In kiddos, it's showing up with ADHD, bedwetting, attention, focus issues. growth problems. They're not growing right because they're not breathing through their nose. They're mouth breathing, huge in kids, and we can prevent it. We can intercept it and stop all this. In adults, it shows up as I can't ever lose weight. I never feel rested. I'm waking up all the time. I have to go to the bathroom a lot at night. High blood pressure, autoimmune disease because the body can never reset itself. That's what we see as symptoms in adults. So this is enormous, and it literally is an epidemic in the world that really nobody understands or is talking about.
Yeah. Very few dentists. Actually, Dr. Pei, he's retired now, but he was great because he was always with my kids, with myself. He's always looking at our mouth structure. And it seems like dentists should also be like your breathing expert, because have you read the book Breathe by James Nestor? I'm sure you have. It's
right there. Great book.
Silly question, but it's so compelling when you start recognizing what happened to their health when they tape their nose,
plug their nose, and
for like a month of that, like all of their markers, their health just deteriorated so fast. It's similar to the Super Size Me documentary where the dude ate McDonald's every day and he got so sick and his liver enzymes just went through the roof. So if you don't believe what Michelle's telling you, well, there's actually people who have experimented these very things and they became very sick for educational purposes. So we've got a question that came here. Allison, good to have you on. Are zirconium implants more difficult to put in than titanium?
Good question. No, the procedure is pretty much identical. The only thing that is more difficult is they do integrate slower. So integrating means the bone growing to it. So it does take a little bit more time. So it's a longer process. I'm talking just, maybe a month longer for the bone to actually grow to it before we can put the top on and you can start chewing with it. But that's really the only difference with it, is it just takes a little longer to integrate.
Got it. Okay. So what else on the breathing side did we not cover? Because that's fascinating.
I think it's just huge. And I think it's huge for kiddos. That's where I love to see the kids, because if I can prevent the kids from turning into their parents, that makes my day, man. We can intercept what's happening and we can help them with growth and development issues. Starts from the very second you're born, looking at lip and tongue ties. That's all developmental, and it's very related to those genetic pieces we talked about. MTHFR is a midline deficiency. So we're often going to see a tongue and a lip tie with someone who has an MTHFR variant. So those are all huge things to find in kiddos. So this is worth talking about with kids too.
Yeah, I think that's empowering. So, and just any final words? The time went by so fast. This has been so fascinating, and I'm just like, I guess I need to. So, how do people work with you, and what's the best way they can reach out? And are there any kind of final thoughts to summarize everything?
Yeah. So there's a lot of different ways you can find me, and a lot of different ways I like to share information. So that was my first book, was actually written about this exact topic, because so much of this is unknown. So I have a big social platform now where we share a lot of information. So that's called Living Well with Dr. Michelle. It's a great place where I share everything across the board, from all the dental pieces we're talking about to all the nutrition pieces. Right now, we're doing a big spring detox, how to get all the junk out in the spring. Nice. And so a lot of fun stuff there. So that's Living Well with Dr. Michelle. It's on Instagram, it's on Facebook, it's wherever. And we have a website as well. We didn't talk at all about fluoride. Fluoride is a big one that I'm a big believer in, no fluoride. And so we found a replacement. So I've actually formulated a tooth powder with some of your listeners may have heard of Just Ingredients. Her name's Carlin Call, and she does a lot of really wonderful products that are very clean. So she and I have formulated a tooth powder together. We just are releasing our fourth version of the formula this week, and it's all remineralizing powder. So it actually rebuilds teeth. Instead of fluoride that causes a lot of other issues, this uses hydroxyapatite, which is what your teeth are made of. So we replace it with the things that they lost instead of the thing that we never had. So hydroxyapatite tooth powder that's available on Living Well with Dr. Michelle also. My dental office is Total Care Dental. That's in American Fork, Utah. And we do a lot of things with people from all over. I do virtual consultations with people from all over, because a lot of times they're just wanting to know what's going on. And then we help find practitioners nearer to them if this is something that they can't travel for, for work and things. But I just like to open people's eyes and let them know what's going on so they can find some answers finally.
That's amazing. And many of our patients fly in. So for those of you who are flying in, getting regenerative medicine, maybe you're doing one of our retreats, our longevity retreats. Why not get your scan done while you're out here with Dr. Jorgensen? I mean, no reason why not to. Her clinic is literally 10 minutes from ours. We're here in Midvale, and American Fork is just around the corner. So, put that together and we can help make some connections as well. So for those of you who are ready to take your health to the next level, I think this has been phenomenal. Michelle, so good to connect again, and congratulations on everything, and really appreciate all the eye-opening insights. So for those of you who enjoyed this podcast, this show, share it with others. We already have Callie, you said, I'm going to share this with everyone. And then we've got one of our attendees. Do you know a holistic dentist on the Big Island? I guess the Big Island might be kind of challenging to get here to Utah, but do you know of anybody there?
So what we do is I always direct people to 2 online directories. I'm actually creating my own online directory right now so I can ensure that people are trained the way that I like them to be trained. But there are 2 others, and we can put them in show notes as well. But one is called the IAOMT, lots of letters. And they are the ones that actually have pioneered this safe mercury removal protocol. So dentists who are on their directory are ones that are already on board with all of that. And the other one is the IABDM, and these are both .org. So it's IAOMT.org and IABDM.org. That's biologicdentalmedicine.org. And it's an organization, again, of dentists who are interested in this kind of thing. So I always direct people to those 2 directories because it's a starting place to find a practitioner near them.
Man, love that. All right. Well, everybody, you got get rid of the amalgam fillings the right way. Mm-hmm. Get rid of the infections, get the right scan, and then make sure that you are doing everything you can to create space in your mouth and nutrients, and looking at genetics. Everything plays in. And then I appreciate you bringing up fluoride too, because it's a big threat to your thyroid and so many other systems in your body. So Michelle, thanks so much for being on. We've got to do this again because I want to go even deeper. So
okay, let's do it.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks so much, Dr. Michelle. Everybody have an amazing day.